Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament, looking at the New Testament church. And today we are looking at Paul writing to the Ephesians about the relationships between slaves and masters. If you've been following us the last couple of days, Paul's been looking at what Christian relationships should look like. We started off with a marriage relationship, what it should look like, and then what the parent and child relationship should look like. And today we're looking at Ephesians 6, 5, and 9, what the relationship between slaves and masters in this time should look like. So it's a few short verses. We'll go through it real quick and then look at our notes. It says, starting in verse 5 of chapter 6 in Ephesians, slaves, obey your earthly masters with deep respect and fear. Serve them sincerely as you would serve Christ. Try to please them at all time, not just when they are watching you. As slaves of Christ, do the will of God with all your heart. Work with enthusiasm, and know you were working for the Lord rather than for people. Remember that the Lord will reward each of you for the good we do, whether we are slaves or free. Masters, treat your slaves in the same way. Don't threaten them. Remember, you both have the same master in heaven, and he has no favorites. And so, the relationship here between masters and slaves and masters, and really by analogy, today would be more between employers and employees, is to be shaped by their commitment to the Lord and their desire to build one another up in Christ. Because, in today, if we're using this in today's sense, I hope no one, that we know or that it would be watching this would own a slave or have anything like that. But there are many of us who are employees. There are many of us who are business owners or bosses. And so this is a good example to use of how we should be as a boss, as an employee, and what that relationship should look like. And so Paul is saying, all right, the Christian slaves of that time, they are to obey their masters, and Christian masters are to treat their slaves kindly. And I want to emphasize again, I've done this each time we kind of come across this subject because I know this is a very touchy subject, especially in the United States. We have to understand that the slavery that we think of, that comes to mind, you know, the 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 slavery that we saw in America in the South and in America's early country is not the same slavery that Paul's referring to here. Now, they're both not good. They're both immoral, right? But the slavery of this time was more of a servanthood, whereas typically it wasn't the one person owning another person. It was one person working off debt, working off something. A particular person owed another person money, and so they basically worked for them until that debt was paid off. That it was indentured servanthood and stuff like that. That's typically the type of slavery that we saw in that time, not the hey, that I bought this person for amount of money and they belong to me, they're a lesser human than I am, that kind of thought. That's not what this type of slavery is. With that said, right, it still wasn't, what God would want. And so Paul, he's not promoting slavery. A lot of people say, look, Paul's promoting slavery by teaching this. And Paul's not promoting slavery by teaching this, right? He's not promoting slavery by teaching Christians to live with. Basically, what he is saying, hey, this is part of our society and culture. Right, we're not here to flip this upside down. Right, we will eventually. Right, and we can see if you actually go back and look at the main reason that slavery in the United States, slavery across most of the world, right? And unfortunately, it still exists today. But why a lot of it was abolished was because of Christians who worked to free slaves, and so that was the result of that. But Paul's mission wasn't to free slaves. His mission was to convert people to Christ. That was more important to him, and so that's what he was doing. But he was saying, look, you're going to have to live with this is our culture, right? You all live in it, but you need to live in a Christ-like way in it. And we even see where he wrote and encouraged, someone to release their slaves. And so I just want to emphasize on that the fact that he's not supporting slavery or saying it's okay. He's saying if this is what's happening, this is in our culture, then this is how you should behave. And so obedient service on the slave side or the servant side, right, was obedient service to the earthly masters expresses a Christian's slave service to Christ. He's like, hey, you serve as if you're serving Christ. And then again, like I said, this applies to our today in our work relationships, right, and stuff like that. The way we work, you know, sometimes it may seem like a slave, but the way we work as workers, we should work as if we're working for the Lord. And so he talks about and says, okay, you're both as slaves of Christ. You're both slaves of Christ, as those who have been bought by the blood of Christ. Believers are no longer bound to themselves. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, where we give up ourselves. We give our lives to Christ, right? It's a sacrificial giving up. We don't belong to ourselves anymore. We belong to Christ. And so, in a sense, what he's saying, and he's using this, we're all slaves to Christ. And so we need to remember that. And so for Christian slaves, the will of God is that they honor him by serving their human masters faithfully and with enthusiasm, right? Don't just do it when they're watching, but you have a work ethic and you work the way God would want you to work, and show that, right? In the same way, that is, with integrity and concern for their welfare, right? And so when Paul's talking about the slave there, then he shifts and says, in the same way, meaning, okay, you masters, in the same way, you need to live and you need to be in a certain way as well. It says, don't threaten them, right? The Christian masters too will be held accountable, right? They're going to be held accountable for the same, by the same master, right? The language that Paul used there in heaven for their lives on earth. So basically, you're going to be held accountable for the way that you treat this person. So you better treat them well and treat them Christ-like. And so, pleasing him required treating their slaves humanely and kindly. And he remembers and he emphasizes with, hey, he has no favorite. God judges all people by the same standard. It doesn't matter what your position was on earth, right? Whether you were a servant, whether you were a slave, whether you were on the bottom of the totem pole of a company, or you were the CEO, God's going to judge everyone the same. He's not going to, not going to give you any special consideration. Well, you're a CEO, so let me give you a higher. No. And so those are the things that we look at and see here. And so basically the really how this applies for us today, right, is employees and boss, like, relationships, I think, more than anything, is, look, this is how you should work. Don't just work hard when your boss is working, or kind of walking around. Work as if you're working for the Lord. Work hard. Now, bosses, owners, CEOs, whatever, managers, you are to work hard too, but you're also to treat those people who are underneath you with the same kind of respect and kindness that God would want you to do. And so that's really important. And I think that's how that applies more in this situation today than obviously the slave and master relationship that we see. So as always, I hope y'all learn from these. I know sometimes we read stuff like this and it's like, well, I don't get this, or the context that comes to mind is, especially for most of us in the United States, is, oh, we think of the pre-Civil War slavery and how could Paul even condone any of that? And it's like, Paul's not condoning it. He's saying this is the way it is, right? This is the culture we live in. So this is how you should behave. This is how you should live on both sides. And there's a lot of times we see that in the Bible. We see things where the Bible speaks to it, and just because the Bible speaks to it doesn't mean it condones it, right? It's not like he's saying, hey, go and make sure you get as many slaves as you can, or all that stuff. He's just saying, this is the culture, this is the reality of what we live in, and so this is how you should behave in this reality. And again, eventually, if we look and see this, the effects of Christianity is, if it were not for Christianity, more than likely, there would still be some slavery, or a lot more slavery in the world today. Because of Christianity and Christians working to end slavery, not only in Europe, but in the United States, was a big reason for why it ended. And so Christianity was a big part of that, and so we need to recognize that as well. So, as always, I hope you learned from it. I hope that you were able to pull something from that you can apply to your life. And as always, I encourage you to subscribe to your channel if you haven't done so. That way, you can follow along with us and get these as that we send them out. And as always, more than anything, I appreciate everyone who takes the time to watch, and I hope y'all have a wonderful day.